Hi crafty friends, welcome back to Liz Longest Designs. Today I am doing a page from my wedding album, which is from 2016, and I am using some old Echo Park from my stash. I'm going to mix two different collections. One was called Just Be You, it's from 2016, and one called Hello Again from 2013. I've cut this XOXO with hearts cut file from my Etsy shop. I'll put a link to that item in the description box. I cut it 3 times and I'm going to tile this across my background. So I picked 3 papers that I thought looked good with the file. This is a really nice open file, so you really get to see a lot of the pattern. So pick patterns that you love. So I flip over the paper and I flip over the cut file and I trace it from the back. And then when I cut it out, I leave a little bit of extra around that pencil line. So you've seen me do this before. This is normally how I prefer to back my cut files. So I'm just going to finish cutting all of those out, and then you will see me glue that up onto the back of the cut file. I still use my tape runner. I don't mess with liquid adhesive. These stick just fine. I haven't had any problems with them coming off in my albums. So there's one, and then magically I have all 3 done. Then I picked a series of 3 Distress Oxide colors. I'm going to ink the background. I'm using from lightest to darkest, Spun Sugar, Saltwater Taffy, and Abandoned Coral. The Spun Sugar is a little bit difficult to see at this part on the background, but trust me, it's there. So I am just smushing some of the ink on a craft mat. I'm spraying it with just plain water, and I'm using some plastic packaging that came off of your stickers, your thickers, a million things that we all get as scrapbookers. I keep a couple pieces of it in a drawer so I can just smush the plastic in the water to pick up the ink and smush it on to my background cardstock. I am using Vicki Boutin's foundation paper for this so that I can really use water and not worry about it. I'm going to add some more layers of things, so I really wanted to make sure I had a good foundation paper for all of the layers and mixed media that I'm going to add. I am wiping down my craft mat in between adding more color as well. There's still some water on the craft mat, and since I use oxides, I don't want to get water in my ink pad and have things start to oxidize when I don't want it to happen. And I want a fair amount of color in the area. I wasn't really looking for a white background. I really wanted a more gradient background to go with the pictures. My wedding album is going to have a lot of white, a lot of mixed media in it, but I really didn't want a stark white background. So adding just a little more color there at the bottom, and that step is going to be done. I will wait for that to dry before I move on to the next layer. For the next layer, I'm going to use this modeling paste. It's basically like a texture paste or 3D paste that you can get in the arts section of your Michaels or whatever local craft store that you use. And I've done the same thing with the oxides. I smushed it onto my craft mat, and then I'm using my palette knife to color the modeling paste to match the ink. And then I'm going to use this stencil from scrapbook.com of the roses. All of the flowers in my wedding were roses, so this was perfect. And I'm going to use that colored texture paste or modeling paste through the stencil in just a few areas. And I'm focusing on putting that on the outside edges and the edges between the colors where the colors overlap, because that is where it's not going to get covered by those cut files. It's magic. All 3 colors of that are done. The second to last layer I am going to add is this really cute heart stencil that I got from Paige Evans. And I'm just using the same color inks in each of the 3 sections with a foam blender. I'm just inking through the stencil, again, focusing on the edges and the areas where the colors meet, since I know that isn't going to be as covered up with the cut files. And then for the last layer, I'm going to use my watercolor brush and do a little bit of sprinkling of ink in all three colors. So I will do the heart stencil and the splattering of the ink in all three colors in all three sections. So that's all done. I've got all three of my cut files already backed, so now it's time to start building the page. I am going to back my photo from our wedding in this really lovely navy to let it stick out a little more from the rest of the papers. I get those three cut files glued up on the back, and I'm just kind of setting them in place until I get all three ready so I can really get the spacing on those right. And as I'm looking at this on my desk, I decide it needs a little something to ground it. So I'm going to trim off just a teensy edge on all the sides of this foundations paper and glue that all to that coral background paper so that you just see the edge of it. If you want to, what they call like gut the center of that paper so that you can save it for another use, you can absolutely do that. These have been in my stash for at least 5 years, so I'm not worried about saving this particular pattern. I'm going to use some pretty heavy duty glue to glue those together just because the foundations paper is a bit wavy from adding all of those layers of mixed media, and I really wanted to make sure it would stick. So now I'm going to get all three of those cut files in place, get them all stuck down really well, and now we can really start building even more layers. I use some pop dots behind the photo to give it a little bit more depth and make it your eye draw to the focal point, which is the photo. I pull out some old Dear Lizzie thickers and use that for my title. It's going to say My Love. We got married on a stage, basically, at our venue, and there was only stairs on the sides to come down. And when we were doing our rehearsal, I don't even remember who came up with the idea of my husband going down the stairs first, turning around and giving me his hand to help me down the stairs, and it just turned into one of my favorite photos from the wedding. So I've grabbed some of the embellishments and 2x2 squares from the same mix of these two old Echo Park lines. I didn't want them all to be as square, and so I cut out that heart so that it is the heart shape. I'm going to go through the cardstock sticker sheet and pull out the stickers that I think I like and really go with the page. I'm trying to make sure I get a little bit of navy in each of my groupings, but you can see I've started kind of my three areas of embellishment, one in the upper left, one above the photo, and then I'll work on one to the bottom right of the photo as well. And again, that same square, I decided I didn't want it as square and cut out the heart. I'm inking everything today with Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide. I tend to gravitate more towards blacks and grays in home decor, in clothing, in all the cool colors all the time. Occasionally I do use brown ink, kind of depends on the paper. But since there wasn't any browns in any of these papers, I stuck with my gray. I did decide that since there was a square in all three locations and I'd cut this constellation heart out already, I added a dark teal piece behind it so that it has a square shape. And I'm going to work on covering up those arrows here in just a bit so it doesn't look like I covered up an embellishment. It just looks like it was a teal square piece. So I'm kind of using the squares as the base for all three sections, and then I'm going to add embellishments around, under, over top, all of those areas until I get enough layers that I'm happy with. I'm going to use that flag to add the navy into the area that has the title, because like I said, I wanted to get that navy into all of those sections since the photo was backed in that navy as well. I make sure all 3 of the sections have something that is popped up on some pop dots. That heart is left over from the, not leftover, but was in the thicker pack. And I'm trying to decide where that's going to go, and inevitably it goes with the title because it felt out of place. Everywhere else there wasn't really any black pieces. I added a little line that says, "You are on my heart," across the bottom of the photo. I'm just adding these last little flowers to each of my clusters, and that's almost done. At the end, I'm going to go ahead and add some enamel dots to each of the sections. I've got some pink ones. I'm going to add teal and white to bring in all the colors that we've got going on the page. Last thing I'm going to do is add some of these Tim Holtz Ideology they're like resin plastic roses. Again, I mentioned all the flowers in the wedding were roses, so these felt really appropriate. They're a little bit bulkier, but I'm expecting my wedding to take up like a full 2 albums, so I'm not really worried about any extra dimension that might happen on a page here or there. I use some glue dots to hold those down so that they're a little bit stronger. I don't think my normal tape runner would hold those in place as well. And there you have it. Here's my completed page with a couple of close-up shots. You can really see all the different layers of mixed media there. You've got the paste and the smushing of the ink and the heart stencil, and I just really love how that turned out. You're definitely going to see more of that in my wedding album in the future. I hope you enjoyed this page. I hope it gave you some inspiration to work on your album. Feel free to leave me a comment. Let me know what was your favorite part, and please like and subscribe. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.